Well, viewers, those were the headlines, and our key focus this hour remains on what is transpiring as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stated that Russian President Vladimir Putin is prepared to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, but that all issues must be addressed first, including questions over Zelenskyy's authority to sign any peace deal. Lavrov has stressed that any meeting must be preceded by thorough preparations with experts and ministers, working out all issues at the highest level. Moreover, he added that legitimacy questions over who can sign agreements on Ukraine's behalf must also be resolved before any deal can be finalized. The announcement comes after US President Donald Trump stated that he had begun arranging a bilateral meeting between Putin and Zelensky, followed by a trilateral summit, including the US President himself. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast is Ambassador Prabhu Dayal. He's a former diplomat joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting developments have been taking place in Moscow today. The latest from Sergei Lavrov is this, that Putin is willing to meet Zelensky, but he's questioning the legitimacy of Zelensky's authority to sign any peace deal. There have been reports ever since yesterday that the White House is eyeing Budapest as a location to hold this proposed trilateral meeting. Zelensky has come out and called a meeting in Budapest as challenging, but Russia, meanwhile, is looking at taking this olive branch. Do you think this meeting will fructify, and will a peace deal be catalyzed?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. We must look at the background of this entire situation. You know, the US President Donald Trump has been pushing for an in-person meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky. And he has said that he hopes that this meeting will lay the groundwork for an end to the Moscow-Russia war. And while the US President has suggested the proposed sit-down, it remains uncertain whether such a meeting will actually happen, because President Putin and Zelensky are locked in a war that both seem to consider existential. And, you know, Trump's return to office, of course, has revived the dormant peace efforts, but the warring parties are still far apart on key issues. Of course, as you said, the Russians have said that President Putin is prepared to meet Zelensky, but all issues must be worked through first. And there's a question about Zelensky's authority, because the Russians keep saying that he lacks legitimacy, and therefore any peace deal that he signs will not have any relevance once the new regime comes up in Ukraine. So these are odds that are coming up. But nonetheless, there are some indications that there could be a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, and that this could be followed by a trilateral summit with the US president.
All right, I also, as a quick follow-up, wanted to understand from you, how exactly do you think leaders in Europe would react to this in particular? Because we've seen that they attempted a show of strength in Washington, but somehow the optics did not work in their favor. Additionally, European nations now will have to pay the United States for security guarantees for Ukraine.
Yes, the European countries are definitely concerned about the moves that Trump is making, because, as you pointed out, they fear that they would have to end up paying for all the security guarantees. Trump is not going to be taking on any of the costs involved. He has said, of course, he will try and do his best and all, but the fact is that the Europeans will have to bear the brunt of the security guarantees. So in a way, it's the US pushing itself out of the situation, which doesn't augur too well, either for Ukraine or for the European Union. Now, I may add that the entire situation seems to be totally uncertain. At the moment, there are lots of ifs and buts, so it remains to be seen how things shape out in the next few days.
All right, and one last final question on this particular piece of news that we are tracking. You've mentioned the ifs and the buts. Today has been quite a charged day even for India. Dr. Jaishankar has met Lavrov in Moscow, and this comes after Russia earlier called US tariffs against India as unjustified and had hinted at perhaps providing a 5% concession on the rate that we purchase oil. So if a peace deal does catalyze, it does fructify, then what could the impact be on India?
Well, first of all, India has made it clear that its ties with Russia are quite independent of its ties with Russia, and that India will continue to buy Russian crude. In fact, the Indian government has said it will take all necessary steps to protect its national interest, and has not given any signal that it will cut back purchases of Russian crude. In fact, the signals are that it will continue doing so. And as you said, the Indian Foreign Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, who's on a visit to Moscow, met his Russian counterparts, and the Indian Foreign Ministry has said that the visit is aimed to further strengthen the long-standing and time-tested India-Russian friendship. So I think that what is emerging is India's resolve to look after its interests, even if it means taking on President Trump, and India's recent engagements, not just with Russia, but with China also, were planned long before the tariff dispute with the United States. And this is the point that we have tried to convey to the other side.
All right, sir, I request you to stay on with